Hi there, and thank you for joining us for this episode of CMPAC Spotlight, where, as you know, we take a little bit of time to get to know some of the producers here at TV Access 21. And right in the studio with me tonight is none other than Mr. Lincoln Scott of Bible Prophecy Revealed. Mr. Lincoln, welcome.
Hey, Don, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Okay.
I'm so glad you're here.
Me too.
Especially in this age of COVID. That's why we have this safe distancing going.
Sure.
But we still are looking at the term, the show must go on.
It has to. It has to.
Yes, sir.
It never stops.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about the fact that it never stops, especially with what you teach and with what you do with your show, Bible Prophecy Revealed.
Sure.
It's such an intriguing topic. Tell me a little bit more about it.
Well, you know, it's an interesting story. About 40 years ago, I was at work. I worked in Washington, D.C., and I came to work one day, and I saw two of my colleagues talking, and I overheard one of them talking about the book of Daniel and this image that people had to bow down and all of that to. And I was intrigued by that. It was something, it just sparked something. I was like, I want to learn a little bit more about what that is. And so I started this odyssey of biblical prophecy and just finding different people, experts. And one of the things about the subject, Bible prophecy, is that a lot of people are intimidated by it because it is one of those subjects that you really can't just get a surface understanding. You have to dig a little bit. Because in as much as the intent is for you to get understanding, but what makes it a little bit challenging sometimes is biblical prophecy has a lot to do with signs and symbols, which are indications of something else, but you have to understand the signs and the symbols to really get an appreciation for what's being said. But more importantly, there is a verse in the book of Isaiah, chapter 46, verse 8. And it says that he knows the end from the beginning. And so I have always been intrigued by that notion because to look at it from a historical perspective, we know that the flood did occur. We know that the children of Israel were delivered. But more importantly, we know that Jesus Christ came and is coming back again. And so trying to just watch how he has tried to, because from Genesis to Revelation, here's the thing. All of it speaks to who Jesus is. Okay. And so part of the reading is trying to find him in each one of these circumstances or books of the Bible because it all speaks to who he is. So that's been a wonderful opportunity for me to grow as a person, but more important, to develop the confidence of knowing that he has it all under control, you know, and that the only thing that we're required to do is just reach out and embrace it. One of the things I talk about and have talked about on my show is that if you are a person who's inclined to believe that there's a heaven and hell, people think that we go to hell because of sin. And I guess to a certain extent, I mean, one of the reasons why we are mindful of that is because we know that there is something bigger than us. But I think of equal importance is people need to understand that you don't go to hell necessarily because of sin, because there's a provision to be found. There's a word they use called the propitiation, meaning a substitute, an advocate, a provision, and the cross is reflective of that. So to make a long story short, what it is that if you avail yourself to Jesus and the sacrifice he made for us, then the Bible says that our sins are covered. Now, it doesn't suggest that if we know that, we are encouraged to go out here and do crazy stuff. But what it says is, and this is really the reaction, is that once you've allowed yourself to surrender yourself to him, then believe it or not, instead of taking advantage of the provision of salvation, you don't want to disappoint him. So you become a better person because you know the reality of who he is. And so that's kind of like the core meaning, because when I think about the purpose of ministry, is to let people know that Jesus is coming back and that we need to prepare ourselves for that.
So here, listening to you, especially when you said that you were listening to some coworkers talk about the book of Daniel.
Yes.
It makes me wonder, were you interested from that historical perspective, or were you interested because of a spiritual encounter that happened to you? What was going on with you?
Well, you always know if you're a believer when he's tapping you on your shoulder. But I think to a greater extent, I think what happens is that God is so merciful and so just full of love that he does not, everybody's course is different. And so I don't have to do it like you don't have to do it like me. But when you belong to him, eventually you will hearken to that voice. You know, there's a verse that speaks to in the book of John, and this is just before Jesus is about to go to the cross, and he's got a couple of his disciples together, and he's explaining to them, you know, there's some things about to occur. And one of the things that he says, though, he prays, and he's praying to the Father, and this is a very important verse, I believe. He says, I have not lost one that you have given me. So what does that mean? Well, it seems to suggest that we are a gift from the Father to him. And he's saying that I've done the job that you've called me to do because I've not lost one. And so I take solace in that. It's very encouraging to know that despite my flaws, which nobody has to point out to me, I'm very aware of what they are, that he still finds time to not only exercise grace and mercy, but continues to bless despite what we do. You know, so that is a heart-wrenching type of love and discovery. And so, again, it is not that we are exempt from the same temptations and things that other people are subject to, but it is the understanding of knowing that we are loved, that we are forgiven, and that we have an obligation to tell somebody about him, because it's all about him at the end of the day. So that helps keeps everything in perspective. And so I feel blessed that for whatever reason, Lord decided that he wanted me to embrace this subject matter.
Yes.
But I think it also is in line with our personalities. Sure. So he knows that I'm one of those people, like a lot of different things, sports cars and stuff, you know, over the years and all that. But whatever I do, my personality is such that I just can't deal with a surface level understanding. I have to dig. And that goes in line with biblical prophecy in the sense that to be able to teach it, you have to go. I remember this guy on my job in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a retired court bailiff.
Okay.
And one day I was in a courtroom and court had ended and we were just sitting around talking. And he happened to be a Christian brother, of course. And he said something to me. He said, you know, Link, he said, it's a matter of, with God, how deep do you want to go? Okay? Because he's open, knock on the door shall be open, you know, accidents shall be given and all of that. But if you want to really understand, you've got to spend time with me, which leads me to the next, I think, relevant point is that Bible prophecy revealed. One of the things that I'm very mindful of is I'm not giving my opinion. I'm saying whatever I speak to about it, it's in the Word. And recognizing that he says that he holds the Word over his name. What does that mean? You can bet on, guarantee that this word is true. And so as an adult male of 64 years old, there's a lot of things I don't know, but I know he is who he say he is. And so that just, I can speak, it's really kind of funny. When I first started in my quest to learn more biblical prophecy, and I would try to talk to people. That's too deep. I don't want to hear that. All of that. And so it can be, in a spiritual sense, kind of a lonely thing. Yeah. Because people are just not ready. But we were talking earlier about COVID and whatnot. And certainly I'm not here to suggest that God created COVID. But the word says he takes everything and uses it. And so even in this situation with COVID that's impacted so many people, my sister, in fact, passed away from COVID.
Oh my, I'm so sorry to hear that. I am so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, she did. So it's real.
It's very real.
It's very, very real. And we take solace in knowing that he still is under control, he has everything under control. But that's not to suggest, and throughout this Bible we'll see, testimony of testimony, that he uses everything. But more importantly, for those that he loves, there's two things. There's those that he loves to get our attention, and then the other thing is, and this is one of the very important core issues in prophecy, is that judgment is also a part of that. Right. And so it's so interesting to be able to look at the news and see the implications of biblical prophecy become before our very eyes.
Yeah, that's something that I definitely wanted to talk with you about, because, we talk about the history and biblical truths, and many times people were talking about how this COVID-19 coronavirus was unprecedented. And it was new, and everybody's wearing masks and not having to do what they had to do before. But we know there are plagues that have come down, pestilences, diseases.
Yeah. Right.
So how would you put this, what we're dealing with right now with COVID-19, in the context of that biblical prophecy?
Well, I will say, this may sound controversial, but I would say that it's a reflection of God's mercy. Why would you say that? The reason I would say that is because man's rebellion has always been a part of human history. And so God had to do things, the flood and this thing. Israel was 400 years in captivity and all this. Why? To get their attention because of what? Their disobedience. So I will say this, that one, whatever's happening, and you can get mad if you want to, but nothing can happen without his permission. So he's allowing this. So if you think about, and unfortunately, we've got about 400,000 people that have died in the United States
about 300,000, a little bit over 300,000. And this, at this taping, it being in December, right? It's a little over 300,000 in this nation.
And that certainly is saddens us.
Absolutely.
But to answer your question, I think, as I said earlier, I think that it is a reflection of grace and mercy in this sense. That if that's what I have to do to get your attention, or use to get your attention, because a couple of 100,000, or maybe even 1 million, I'm not suggesting that's going to happen, but what I will say is, as compared to all of humanity, right, that's a small exercise in judgment to get your attention.
Get your attention.
And of course, there's some people that don't believe that they need to even engage him. And I think that we can, as it has been said before, you got to let it play out. But I am totally convinced, and I have a buddy in Cleveland, and he's a Christian brother. And one of the things we always do is at the end of our conversation or email or text, whatever, we always say, still convinced that he is who he say he is. You know, so I think that's what's changed for me relative to biblical prophecy and trying to share it, is that before I think I was inclined to not want to be pushy or insistent or just trying to help people see the truth of it. I will say now I don't really feel I still feel as strongly as I do about getting the message out. But your reaction to me doesn't matter because I know this is what he say.
Right.
This is what he say, not what I say, he say.
And you feel like, of course, that you're doing your purpose and doing what you said earlier, getting the message out to other people.
Right. It's a very, you know, Donna, it's a very important message. And I will say this, that unfortunately, in my culture, shall I say our culture, this is one of the areas that has been least talked about, studied, or explained in the church. It's biblical prophecy again, because people don't want to deal with that. But it's probably the most relevant. And believe it or not, it says that it's probably one of the greatest evangelistic tools that we have at our disposal.
I agree.
You know, and so I just feel, and I'm just really, you know, at this point in my life, I probably have never felt as comfortable or relaxed about life. And certainly these challenges are coming, and I see that, but I also see the evidence of his truth and what he said and what we can anticipate and all these different things. I mean, just the Bible speaks to monetary things and cashless societies, and, you know, there's a lot of stuff that is really, we're seeing the development and the opening of, artificial intelligence.
Oh yeah, that's
very
a lot.
Very important piece.
Yeah.
The book of Daniel talks about, and knowledge shall increase. They tell me that, Don, they say that every 18 months, information doubles.
Interesting you brought that up, but that's going to be for another show. What I want to talk to you now about is kind of going back to what you were talking about, the news, things that are happening in the news, as well as with, of course, your show, which is airing on Access 21. But you have some background in media. Tell us a little bit about that.
I had worked at back in the 80s, I worked at a rock and roll radio station in Manassas, Virginia. And after that, I was living in Washington for maybe, 15 years. Moved back to Ohio, and after a period of time, I got hooked up with a minister whose church happens to have a radio station. And so that was the opportunity that allowed me to really speak to what was really on my heart. That, of course, is Bible prophecy. Yeah, so that worked out well, and it was kind of good because it kind of prepared me for coming to Access 21. You know, and I'll do a selfless plug about Access 21. It's a wonderful station because one of the things I love the most about it is that everyday people who may not be the big muckety muck on the job, they can come here and realize a dream. And so there's nothing more exciting to me than people who never thought that they would be able to experience their show or creating something can come here, and with a modest amount of training, you can actually have your show on TV or on the internet or whatever you want to do. And so I just think, and I will say that I've seen, as you know, we've got our fair share of people who are coming from a spiritual place. And I think that it's just wonderful that Access 21 is willing to allow everybody, no matter what your background is, to experience the things that are close and dearest to you.
Absolutely, dearest to you. And so there's so much that is happening in our community. And there's so many people who have something that's near and dear to them that they would love to be able to express in this medium or through this medium. And I love what you do, and I love what you have at least told me about that I've never experienced with you in terms of what you did in Virginia and in Ohio, and then come here because I was wondering what in your background was making you passionate about having this show. And so that's just a little.
Okay, well, I will say this. The Bible uses a term called unction. And I just believe that God puts things in you. And he knew, and from the beginning, he knew that I would eventually be here. He knew that what he had put in me, and that, like I said, the biggest thing that has changed, I should say, today than even 5 years ago. I think people are much more receptive to the idea of biblical prophecy now, because they recognize that so many things are out of their control.
Right.
And they have lost confidence in systems and people, dare I even say government. And so
you can dare say it.
So at the end of the day, I think it really comes down to what you believe. I think it comes down to who do you want to be. I think that you can't listen to the rhetoric, but I think the thing that really sticks out for me in the course of all this stuff is that things are unfolding exactly as the Bible says it would.
Interesting, so interesting.
Yeah. One of the things that I think that people need to take note of, and this is, I think, a really important point. God decided to use the Jewish nation to bring the reality of him to the world. And one of the things they have in theology, they make reference to something called replacement theology. And what does that mean? That means that people sometimes will take information, things that are relevant to the nation of Israel, and will try to apply them to the church.
Okay.
And that is a misnomer, because we're talking about two separate entities with two different missions. Okay? And so what can be confusing is that you might be looking over here, but really the answer's over here. How should I say this? God's time clock is measured, and has always been measured, by the nation of Israel. What's my point? So if you really want to understand biblical prophecy, the first thing you must recognize is that they are the place where God displays whatever he's going to do first. And so the nation of Israel is going to be looming much more larger as time goes on. And let me even say this. In truth and in fact, the church's mission is coming to a close. People don't recognize that. But that which he designed for the church is coming to an end, and he's shifting his energies back to the nation of Israel. Why do I say that? Because the nation of Israel, the Bible talks about the nation of Israel, and it speaks to them, and it relates to something called 7-year tribulation period. And I'm really kind of like condensing a lot of information in a short.
Sure, but of course we know that we'll be able to see a lot of that on your show, but continue for a little bit.
And so with that being said, more and more things are happening in the nation of Israel, and a lot of how America fares really depended upon their relationship with the nation of Israel. Because the Bible speaks to the fact that I'll love those that love you, and I will despise and judge those that judge you.
Absolutely.
So I would just encourage people to certainly recognize that, one, first and foremost, what has God called you to do? But also, if you really want to understand where this thing is headed, follow it. First and foremost, it's in the Word. But what's going to be intriguing for you is that once you read the Word, then it will make sense of what you see happening in the Middle East. And so all of that stuff is like tied together. A lot of historical issues are unfolding, brother against brother.
Right.
All that, from way back.
Right.
And so I feel saddened that more people are not willing to at least recognize the truth or the possibility of it being what it is.
Well, I tell you, it sounds like because of your passion and because of the show that you're already giving people some reference as to how to study during this time. And that was one of the things I was going to ask you. And there's probably some people at home right now who want to know what it took to get to this place with you and the show. What were some of the steps that it took to just get to this place where you have your show and you can start expressing this passion that you're sharing right here on this show?
Well, certainly, the first thing is you have to express interest. You make a phone call. It's really pretty simple when you think about it. You make a phone call, you come down, you have an idea. James, the studio manager, will sit down with you and kind of like work through what your show is about, kind of give you some fine details about what might work, what might not work, why this wouldn't work as opposed to this. But really, kind of helping you try to present your show in a way that makes sense.
Right.
And so having the availability of those resources, you being one person, some other folks that work here have been very consistent in support of those people that have come down here. Certainly Access 21 as a whole, the mission is to not be discriminatory in any way, but to allow people, again, to express themselves without judgment, okay? Because it's all about the creative thing.
Right.
And so it was simply a matter of coming down and letting them know what I was interested in. But I would encourage people, though, it's really important, though, do your research. I mean, whatever your given subject is, do your research. And so, because you are going to be speaking to an audience, and you do want it to come across as best as you can. I like the idea that even though there is significant training that's available to you here, to me, what's really cool, and I've tried this, I've always wanted my show to reflect a conversational type of atmosphere.
Absolutely, yeah.
And also, it was really important for me, not to come across as an intellectual. I mean, certainly I need to know what I'm talking about.
Right, but I tell you what, we're running out of time. I hate that, that. We run out of time for this show. But what I would love to do is encourage our viewers to watch your show, to be on the lookout for it coming up in 2021. And I thank you for being here. And I thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Don. I appreciate it. Thank you. And guys, by Prophecy Revealed, I look forward to you tuning in. Thank you.
Absolutely. And you guys, again, thank you so very much. Thank you so very much for tuning into this episode of CMPAC Spotlight. We look forward to seeing you again, or you seeing us again on the next episode. Have a great one.